In the heart of distant mountains, there was a small town called Albiron. A quiet town, its residents were kind, living simple, routine lives. Everyone knew each other, and the days passed peacefully. But on a cold winter night, events began to change unexpectedly. People started disappearing. It began when a man named Daniel, who worked at a small shop, went missing. He went out one evening as usual to deliver some goods and never returned. The next day, he didn't show up for work, and there was no trace of him. His family called the police, who combed the surrounding area. There was no clue as to what had happened. Daniel had simply vanished into thin air. As the days passed, people began talking about Daniel, and worry grew throughout the town. His disappearance wasn't the first. There had been rumors of other people who had gone missing over the years, but they usually returned after a few days, often bruised or in a poor mental state. But Daniel never returned, and no trace of him was ever found. A week after Daniel's disappearance, something unexpected happened. That night, a young girl named Lisa went out to visit her friend. Darkness had fallen, but she wasn't afraid. She knew the town well, and the streets were familiar to her. But she didn't return home that night. The next day, families gathered in the main square. Fear began to creep into everyone's hearts. Lisa, like Daniel, had disappeared without a trace. Rumors began to spread about a strange phenomenon happening in the town. In a small cafe, Marcus, one of the town's residents, sat with his old friend Thomas. They were speaking in hushed tones as the wind howled outside. Marcus, in a low voice, "I heard that Lisa disappeared too. What's happening in this town?" Thomas, with a tense look, "This isn't just a coincidence. There's something in the dark, something we can't see. Do you remember the old rumors about people who used to come back? Maybe this time they won't come back at all." Marcus, putting his hand to his mouth, nervous, "What you're saying is scary, but I can't deny it. There's been a strange feeling in this town for a while now." Thomas, whispering, "I don't sleep well at night. I feel like I'm being watched. We need to be careful." That night, the town began to feel different. The once familiar streets became frightening, and shadows that once seemed normal turned into moving phantoms. People started closing their windows earlier and refused to go out at night. Fear was spreading like wildfire. As the number of missing people grew, a small group of townsfolk decided to investigate the matter themselves. Marcus was one of them, along with Thomas and 3 others. They were convinced that something was lurking in the dark, but they had no clear idea of what it could be. One night, they ventured out together, armed with flashlights and simple weapons, heading towards the older part of town, where several abandoned houses had once been used. As they walked through the narrow alleys, a sense of fear and anticipation hung over them. Every little sound made them jump. The wind was howling, and the trees swayed as if whispering dark secrets. The town seemed on the verge of collapse. Marcus, speaking in a troubled voice, "Do you feel something strange? This place isn't right." Thomas, looking around cautiously, "I don't like this. There's something here. I'm sure of it." Alex, one of the other members, looking at the sky, "Look at the clouds. They seem to be moving in an unnatural way." As they wandered, they noticed an old house in the middle of the abandoned district. It looked dark, and the door was slightly ajar. Without thinking, they decided to enter. Inside the house, the smell was foul. The walls were covered in dust and mold, and the floor creaked with every step they took. They shone their flashlights in all directions, but what they saw inside made them freeze in shock.